Welcome to the Division of Fire Safety's YouTube channel. I'm Assistant State Fire Marshal Patrick McLaughlin. We're here at the South Burlington Fire Department to talk about 911. Have you ever had to call 911? Do you think your child could call 911? Let's talk about it. We'll find out some great information. So we're here with Lieutenant Titilio with the South Burlington Fire Department. We're just kind of interested in how many calls South Burlington had last year in 2019.
Yeah, thanks for asking, Pat. Last year in 2019, the South Burlington Fire Department responded to 3,752 emergency calls for service. It was a record number for us in 2019, and I know our Fire Marshal's office made contacts with just about 8,000 public figures out of that office as well.
That's a pretty big number for a department here in Vermont. Any of those, or even in the last couple of years, have you ever had a child have to call 911, and how did that incident go?
Yeah, absolutely. I can't speak about the dispatch end of it, but we certainly responded to a call involving a parent who was having a medical emergency. Turns out the parent was suffering from a drug overdose, and the child, who was 10 years old, was able to call 911 via a cell phone located in the house and give the appropriate directions and address to the dispatcher.
So that really speaks volumes about the fire prevention and education of emergency services you guys do here at South Burlington School. Can you talk about any of that stuff that you guys do here?
Sure, I'd love to. So we teach fire prevention in the schools and focus on kindergarten through grades 5. During the National Fire Prevention Week in October, I see over 900 students here in South Burlington. We also focus on the daycare and preschool centers as well. Those typically are upon request of the local daycare centers. But the fire prevention activities and education that we focus on in the schools is really grade specific and all encompassing. And we really try to drive home as many different topics as possible, and what we find is oftentimes these students go home and they're educating their parents in the household with that.
That's great. So we have the education of the students, and then going back to educate their family and practicing all those things that they might have learned as more or less homework for the fire service to make sure that they're doing some good fire safety. We're talking about 911, how to call. So once you call 911 in a fire emergency, getting outside and staying outside, can you talk on how important that is to stay outside and have an important known location where your family will meet in the event of emergency?
Sure. So we know that one of the acronyms that we're well aware of in the fire service is get out and stay out. And even though I focus on grade specific and age appropriate topics, this is one of those topics that I teach all grades, K through 5, all students every year, because it's critical for all of them to know that they need to get out of their homes quickly and safely and stay low and go, and not to return to their homes to retrieve any of their pets or any of their missing family members. We know how quickly fire can double in size. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. The risk of going back inside and possibly succumbing to the smoke that's inside that building is extremely dangerous. And one thing we know about children is they tend to associate danger with fire, particularly getting burned with fire. So one thing we try to focus on is explaining the dangerous impacts of breathing in smoke and the byproducts that the fire creates. Things like carbon monoxide gas and things like hydrogen cyanide gas, and making them aware that it's extremely dangerous for them to be inside in these situations. In fact, most fire fatality deaths in this country are caused by smoke inhalation and not thermal burns.
Right, so you were talking about get out as soon as they can, call in 911, because fire growth is so dramatic as it progresses through the stages of the fire. So when you get out, you're staying out. How important is to make that 911 call as soon as you're safely able to do so?
Well, it's extremely important. We know with human behavior, sometimes people want to get involved and use a fire extinguisher to potentially extinguish a small fire, and we certainly teach fire extinguisher use to some populations of the public. But we try to encourage kids that extremely important for them to stop what they're doing and pay attention to the sounds of the smoke detectors. Hopefully they have working smoke detectors in their homes, and they get out immediately. We know with fire behavior today in if we look at modern fire behavior curves, fire can double in size anywhere from 30 to 45 seconds to 2 to 5 minutes. The take-home message for children in the schools, though, is they don't have a lot of time. We know that smoke detectors are proven to give us enough time to get out, but that's provided we recognize that there could be a danger, and we have to, pay attention to that and leave our homes immediately and find two ways out. And that's why we preach practicing our escape plans. We know that families that practice escaping together, they tend to escape together and go to their meeting spot, provided it's been identified ahead of time and it's in a safe location in close proximity to their home, preferably in the front of their home.
Right. So we were talking earlier about sports and how it's really important to practice sports because you want to be better at the sport. Fire safety is no different. If you're practicing your drills, when that emergent game time comes and you've got to act, having practiced that at home and at your aunts and your grandparents, anywhere your children may stay, is really important to have that mental muscle to be able to act in the event of emergency.
Yeah, it certainly is. And one thing I've observed over the last 7 years of teaching fire prevention, it always amazes me how many children willingly admit that they don't practice escape plans in their homes with their families. So for me, it's a friendly reminder every year to encourage these kids to go home and remind their mothers and fathers or the adults in their home that the firefighters want them to practice their escape plans. And one of the ways that I get their attention on this is I find something that they can relate to. And so I talk about sports or activities that they might do, like playing instruments, and explain that in order for us to prepare for the games, we all have to practice. Even professional athletes practice, and they practice so that they can perform better on their game days. And in fire safety, it's the same thing. The key to effective fire prevention education is that the behavior exists throughout our lives every day, 12 months out of the year. So it's really important to get the children to understand that they need to actually practice an escape plan during the daylight hours. During the nighttime hours, they need to activate their smoke detectors in their homes so they can recognize what they sound like, and then actually physically go through looking for two ways out and going to their meeting spot. So that way, when an emergency occurs, which we know in the fire service, emergencies can occur any time of the day, any time of the night. When it catches somebody off guard, they know exactly what to do, and hopefully they can do it in a calmer manner than what they typically the body would respond to by being stressed and having a release of adrenaline.
Having that muscle memory in fire safety is really important. So just changing gears a little bit, they've made the 911 call, the emergency dispatcher has dispatched the fire, EMS, law enforcement, whatever the nature of the emergency is. Now getting there, finding that home without a number, how difficult is that, and what is the importance of properly numbering houses to make sure you respond?
Sure, well it's extremely important, and one thing we focus on here in South Burlington is for homes to be properly numbered. And what that means is not just having an appropriately sized number. We like to see something that's at least 3 inches in height, but something that has contrasting colors from the exterior siding. Some buildings might have brick on the outside. Many residential homes have vinyl siding, so that first responders can quickly and safely locate the address. Oftentimes, we're responding to emergencies in the dark, and although we have highly sophisticated lights on our emergency vehicles today, we still sometimes have difficulty locating the address numbers. Time matters in cardiac arrests, building fires. If a patient's having a serious medical emergency, it's critical for police, fire, and ambulance responders to arrive in a quick and safe fashion, and one of the keys to that is being able to locate the house number.
Research shows that when your child is developmentally able to speak and to comprehend things, it's usually best to start teaching them how to dial 911. In our calendar this year, it says every second is precious, which is very true, because if you're not around and your child witnesses an emergency, it's pretty good to have them know how to dial 911.
So we all know how to get into our own phones, whether that's a passcode, a fingerprint, or even facial recognition. But do your children know how to get into a phone and make a 911 call? On most phones, there's an emergency button. By striking that emergency button, it'll bring up a keypad, where your children could learn how to dial 911 in an emergency from a locked phone.
On iPhones and Android devices, all have an emergency button. On the iPhone, you can push the button 5 times, that's the lock button, and it'll display this screen where you can make an emergency call by just swiping the screen.
So here we are in dispatch, where 3 things you need to know when you first call: where the emergency is happening, what the emergency is, and your phone number. And when you're doing that, make sure to remain calm when you're talking to the dispatcher. That way we can get somebody out there as soon as possible.
We hope you enjoyed this video about the Vermont Enhanced 911 system and maybe even learned something about dialing 911. If you did, remember to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so you know when we add content here in the Division of Fire Safety's YouTube channel.
And thanks for watching. And remember, when you call 911, in the event of any emergency, get out and stay out. And also, smoke and CO alarms save lives.